Today we are going to cover the only remaining topic that we have in our testing syllabus, which is software configuration and change management. So it's a very small topic, won't take more than 5 minutes. So we'll finish that up, and then I have gone ahead and created a test plan, a comprehensive test plan for our live project. So I'm going to walk you through that document just the way we walked through the functional specifications document yesterday. And then we are going to see some pointers on how to write an effective manual testing resume. Okay, so that's the topics for the day. I'll get started with configuration and change management. So as a definition, a testing process, what is a testing process? It is nothing but execution of a test plan. Execution of a test plan, correct? And we all know that the test plan is not a static document. It is not a static document. It is a dynamic document. That means as and when changes happen, the test plan is always updated and kept current. So when we say it is updated on a regular basis, what causes this updation? So there are one of these things that might happen. First thing is the user requirements might change, or the conditions for test execution might change, right? So when we say conditions for test execution, this could mean environment, this could mean schedules, this could mean, so when I say schedules, the development team might delay a project or something. So the conditions for test execution have changed, right? Because the earlier agreed on schedules might not hold true anymore. So these are some of the changes that might happen in that might occur that cause a change in the test plan document, correct? So when the user requirements change, it could be one of these things. First, there could be a minor change, or there could be major change. Again, minor or major, they could be single or multiple. So there are basically three processes in place for us to handle all these situations. Again, to recap, testing process is nothing but the execution of a test plan. The test plan is dynamic in nature. That means as and when changes occur, this document is updated to make sure it is current. It shows the current status of the project. The changes could be any one of these. The user requirements might change. The conditions around the execution of test cases might change. That means the test execution parameters might differ. Now, this test execution parameter difference, it could be in terms of the environment, it could be in terms of schedules, or it could be in terms of data or anything else, right? When the user requirements change, it could be a minor change, it could be a major change, again, one change or more than one change. So to make sure that all these changes are tracked in a consistent manner, there is a process in place. There are actually three software processes in place to make sure all these changes are tracked in a consistent way. And they are software configuration management, change management, and version control. Right? Any kind of changes in the environment or the execution conditions, managing that change is called the configuration management. So basically this is for environment, data, schedules, etc. Okay, so that is related to configuration management. Any changes in the feature of the software, that is handled by the process called change. So this is basically features. And version controlling is to make sure, we'll come to the version controlling in a little bit. Okay, so say that certain delays have happened in the in us getting the build. Okay, there is a development team they delayed the whole process by 2 days. So it is up to the responsibility of the configuration management team to make sure that this 2 days is updated in the test plan and the scope of change is identified. So that means when the 2 days delay has happened, there could be one of these two things that will happen. So either the QA cycle gets extended by 2 days, or the QA cycle still remains the same while the testing scope is reduced. And again, any testing scope cannot be reduced. It should be reduced in a way that it is a minimum risk. Okay. So making sure of or overlooking this entire process is basically configuration management's responsibility. Okay. Usually in small projects, in small teams, configuration management is an inbuilt process for the QA team. So this is a collective decision that is made by the BAs and the QA team basically if the project size is small. But for huge projects, for bigger projects, there is a dedicated configuration management team that will take care of all these things. Another change can be environment wise. So if at all a change in the environment happens, so we have discussed this, there is typically development team, QA team and production environments, correct? There are 3 instances of similar environments. So anytime a change needs to happen in the environmental requirements for a project, it is up to the configuration management team's responsibility to make sure all the environments are consistent or the same, and to also make sure that the documentation around these environmental requirements are also updated. Okay, so this is basically configuration management. Anything that is external to the features and that changes, it is up to the software configuration management's process and the team to make sure that all changes are reflected everywhere consistently. Okay, any questions? Okay, then let's see what change management is. Change management, as we discussed, is change in the feature. Okay, so say there is this build 1 and it has feature 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5. Okay, after a couple of testing or after even if it's going into production, you realize that there has to be feature 6 plus feature 3 needs to work differently. Needs to be different. So these are the things that you realize. So if at all these are minor changes, then it is not treated as a complete project. Not treated as a different project. So in this case, what happens is there is a CR process that comes through. CR is nothing but a change request. So who raises this change request? Either the client or the project team. I mean, in fact, it is a combination of both of these people who will request for a change, and then this change request is created. It is basically distributed to everybody, like the QA team, the dev team, the support team, everybody, and this change is analyzed. Is it a valid change or not is then decided, and then all the documentation is updated and the change is implemented. Okay, so change request is typically the process for handling any kind of change. All right, if at all it is a major change, like that means the way the application is going to behave going forward, if that's going to change, the version number of the application is going to change. Say if it is 1.0 and the CR is minor, so the version might change to 1.1. But if it is a major change, it is treated as a different project plus version changes to 2.1. So version controlling works in conjunction with both configuration management and change management, and that is how all changes in the test plan, that means user requirement changes, environment schedules, data changes are all handled in a software project. Basically, what really happens is effective communication is the basis for all these management processes to go smoothly. Okay, any questions, team, in this topic? Okay, so that officially completes all the syllabus. So today I have, as I said, I created the test plan document for the live project, and I'm going to give you all a walkthrough. We will actually go over each section of the document, and we'll try to understand how a test plan is built. Okay. So this is the page 1. Here, as you can see, there is the version history. It's version 1. It's created today, and the status is a draft. Again, this is all the sign-off information. So, in the reference document section, what is the document based on which we are creating the test plan? What is the input document for us? Any thoughts, team? On what basis did I create this document? I used the functional specification, FSD. So, it is the FSD document, the version 1.0, and the date created probably yesterday's date. So all the documents that you have used as your reference, they have to be listed here. Okay, and this is the table of contents. We can come back to it later. First, the purpose of this document. So what is this document going to define? It's going to define the test strategy. It's going to define the execution strategy. It's going to define the test management process. We'll see each one of them in detail now. So as the project overview, again the goals that we discussed yesterday in the FSD, we are actually putting out the same information here, because whether it is the testing module or the development module or basically the support module or any other module, the project's goal remains the same. We are all working towards achieving the common goal, that is whatever, to basically build a software that the client needs. Okay. Audience, that means who is the consumer for this document. Okay. So the project team members, the project manager, the stakeholders, that means the client, the technical team, which could be the business and the which could be the development team and the design team, and the business analysts will provide their inputs on functional changes. So let's look at it at a high level. The project team members, what are they going to do? They are going to perform the tasks and provide inputs and recommendations on this document. And the project manager is going to make plans for the overall project schedule, reviews and tracks the information. So the stakeholders are going to understand the UAT requirements, and they're going to they're going to be kept updated through this document. Okay, the technical team will again plan their deliverables, and business analysts will provide inputs. All right, so these are the audience. Now test strategy. Again, test strategy is nothing but how are we going to test this software. Okay, what are the test objectives? So the test objective is to verify that the functionality of our site works according to the specifications. Okay, so the final product of the test is twofold. This is nothing but we are defining what do we expect the outcome of the testing process to be. It is, you're going to get the product, production ready software, and then you're also going to have test scripts that can be reused for multiple functional and UAT tests. Okay. Now, assumptions. First assumption is that production-like data will be available in the system prior to functional testing, right? Because you need to have the basic setup, the kind of data that it's going to be there in the real time. You need that kind of data to proceed with your testing, right? Do you all agree with that, team? Okay, again the next assumption is that in each test phase, cycle 3 will be initiated if the defect rate is high in cycle 2. So what does this mean? That means we are planning to test the software only for cycle 1 and cycle 2. In case there are high, there are more number of defects in cycle 2, unfixed open defects of high severity, only then there will be a cycle 3. Otherwise, the testing is going to go on for only cycle 2 cycles. So test plan is the perfect way to describe what you're going to do, how many times you're going to repeat a certain process, and all the other details. You'll see how comprehensive this document gets. Now, again, the general assumptions are exploratory testing would be carried out once the build is ready for testing. This document does not include performance test requirements, and every defect that we raise should come with a JPEG format snapshot and all these details. Okay, again, I'm going to send out this document. Please go through each and every aspect. I have made sure to include as many details as I can in this, because this can serve like a template for you going forward. So I'm not going to go over each one, but in case you want me to repeat a certain section or go over a certain point, let me know. I will do that. But for now, I'm just going to go to the functional testing section. There are two assumptions to start the functional testing phase. It says during functional testing team will use preloaded data, and the test team will perform functional testing only on CarGuruji. Okay, and the UAT testing, who will be performing it, and QA group will be providing their support. Okay, and the testing principles. These are basically the guidelines based on which you're going to create your test documentation. And the data approach. Again, as we are talking, we decided earlier, the data will be preloaded into the site. Okay, scope and levels of testing. So we are going to have an exploratory testing. Again, we are defining 5 aspects for each level of testing. We are going to define what is the purpose of that type of testing, what is the scope, that means which is the functionality that gets included here, who is involved, the method that you're following, and when are you going to do this. Okay, let's look at it for exploratory testing. Exploratory testing, the purpose of this test is to make sure critical defects are removed before the next level of testing can start. So what we are trying to tell here, so you get a build. First thing you're going to do is exploratory testing. So that means you're going to test the key functionality, key functions, to make sure nothing critical, there are no critical errors. So this is another way of sanity testing, correct? So only if the exploratory testing passes can you go ahead and do the functional testing, which is nothing but the in detail testing following your test cases. Okay. So scope is, we are going to test the first level navigation, the dealer and admin modules. Okay. Who is going to do this? The testing team. And the method it just gives you a brief description of what exploratory testing means. It means that the testing is carried out on the application without any test scripts or documentation. Okay. And when will this occur? At the beginning of each cycle. So in case if your application, if in your project the system is that you will first perform a smoke test, followed by a sanity test, followed by the functional test, then that is what the levels that you will specify in the test plan. Since I am going with the exploratory, functional and UAT, I have defined these 3 levels in my test plan. Again, you can customize it any way you like. Okay. Now, functional testing phase. Here, functional testing will be performed to check the functions. And how is it going to be done? You are going to give the input and validate the output. Now, this is the place where we define the scope. Okay, scope is nothing but what is your test objectives. Scope, test objectives. Sorry. Scope is nothing but the test objectives or the test scenarios. So here, instead of just giving the list here, what I've done is I have created a separate document for including the test scenarios, and I have just embedded it here to make this document more readable. But if it works for you that you can just copy and paste all the test scenarios here, you can do so. But always keep in mind to make sure that you keep this document as readable as you can and very professional and clean. without any ambiguity. So if I open this document, if you see, I have just created some test scenarios for the admin module. So in the admin, the user is now obviously admin, and the scenario is that there is a login page, and I'm going to test the login functionality. The complexity is medium. Again, I'm just estimating the number of negative scenarios, probably because for login I'm going to give a incorrect username and password. I'm going to say there is just one negative scenario. Again, I wrote down the different modules in the admin, and I wrote down the different scenarios I'll be testing, the sub-levels of the scenarios. So in this way, you can create for dealer, you can create the first level navigation. So you can just go ahead and include all the test scenarios or test objectives that you are going to test as part of your functional testing phase. Okay. All right. So that is my functional testing scope. Who will perform this? Testing team. What is the method? The scripts are going to be stored in HPALM. And when is this going to occur? After the exploratory testing is complete. So what I want you to note here is the level of detail. So it does not leave it to any, it does not leave any chance for any assumptions. The more clearly you document the test plan, the more effectively the execution is going to happen. There is no ambiguity of what to expect from this step. There is no ambiguity about what to test. There is no ambiguity about how you are going to test. There is no ambiguity about who is going to test. So that is the beauty of having a comprehensively written test plan. Now, the test acceptance criteria, that means when are you going to start testing? So the first thing is FSD use case document must be available before even you start designing the test. That means when you start actually documenting your test case, you need to, before you even begin documenting your test cases, you need to have an approved FSD and a USD document. Okay, and the test cases should be approved and signed off before the test execution. So this is like a readiness checklist. You are making sure that all your test cases are written, you had the right inputs, they were reviewed, and then development should be completed, unit test should be passed, and the result should be shared to the testing team to avoid duplicate defects. Test environment should be installed, configured, and ready to use. So now what all should be signed off? Approved functional specs, approved use cases, approved test cases. And what does the readiness mean? Development should be complete, application should be deployed, production like data should be available, and then defect fixes on the the unit testing. When the unit testing phase was happening, I'm sure there might be some defects that they encountered. So they have to be fixed, and the team should be aware of that. Okay. And now deliverables. What are the deliverables that you are expecting out of this functional testing phase? So the test plan, who is the responsible person who is going to review it, and in the same way test cases, defects, and everything. Okay, so this is the roles part. So who is going to perform what action, and who is going to review it, and things like that. Okay, and then the milestones. Milestones is nothing but the schedule, and I also created a tentative sample schedule. So as we talked about in the earlier sections, it says that cycle 3 will only be performed if the cycle 2 encounters more defects. So that means as per the original plan, there is cycle 1 and cycle 2, correct? So for the cycle 1, I have just allotted 5 days. Again, this is tentative, just some rough estimation to show you how it really works. And then there is one development day in the middle to actually fix the bugs that we encounter, and another day to retest all the bugs, and then starts the cycle 2 with new builds. Same thing, again I have put in 1 day for retest, 1 day for development. So each phase or each test execution phase is clearly marked on when it is starting and when it is ending, and how many times the entire how many days the entire process is taking. So this is how schedules are defined. Again, please note that I've used a separate document and embedded it here to make sure that this document is very, very readable. Okay. Now I have defined the acceptance test criteria also. Again, just go over it when you get some, probably now or later, And if you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer. But for now, I'm just going to the next one. Now, just the way we estimated schedules, test plan is also a wonderful document where you estimate the effort. Effort in the sense how many hours it takes to complete a certain activity, a certain testing activity. Now, let me open the estimation document. Each phase is clearly defined, and the number of hours to complete each phase is also defined very, very clearly in this document. Okay. Now, existing application, familiarization, and orientation. Again, these numbers are not definitive. I just put in some dummy numbers to just make sure that it makes a little bit of sense. Now, the important thing to note here is this phases of the QA activities. So this is a wonderful way to recollect all the activities that happen in a testing process. Okay. The first thing is existing application familiarization or orientation. So that is what we did yesterday, right? The FST walkthrough. That is nothing but the KT of the existing application. I just put in as 10 hours. So that is where first thing it starts. Next is requirement analysis. So from yesterday's FSD, we actually tried to understand which are the functional requirements, which are the GUI requirements, which are the accessibility requirements, which are the performance requirements, and things like that. So for requirement analysis, I put in 5 hours. Then for test planning, another 5, environment support, ad hoc testing. If you note this, there is a phase, there is an inclusion for peer reviews here. So this will give you an understanding of how important review process is for every testing artifact that gets created. So anytime you make you give an estimate on how much time it takes to create a document, always make sure that you include the time it takes for you to review the document also. Now, after this, the test lead or coordination or status reporting effects. So this is basically how many hours it takes for the test lead to coordinate all these processes that come before. So the industry standard is 10% of the entire time, so which is nothing but 7%. So total design effort is 77. When I say design, it means test documentation. Okay, now test case documentation. Again, in the same way, there is test execution timelines, defect logging timelines, and UAT timelines, post-production timelines, etc., etc. And what these parameters mean, I just have defined it. So this is how effort is estimated. Okay. Again, I embedded this document to make sure it is readable. Now the execution strategy. This clearly defines the entry and exit criteria. That means when do we start testing, and when do we stop testing. So the entry criteria is the readiness information that we saw earlier. All the signed off documents being available, test cases already done, and things like that. Now the exit criteria is 100% of the script should be executed, 99% of the scripts should have passed, and no critical or high severity bugs are open, and things like that. You can go into as detailed as you like. I just made sure to include as many conditions as I could, so that when you have this document as your reference, you'll be able to adapt it to your situation very easily. Okay. So that is the entry and exit criteria. Now, test cycles. It says that there will be 2 test cycles for functional testing, and each cycle will execute all the scripts. So the first objective is to identify blocking critical. Okay, so we are right now here defining what each cycle means and why is that we have 2 test cycles. So the rationale behind choosing the 2 test cycles as your execution methodology. Again, the defect management process is explained here. I have actually included some. If you look at this table, this will give you a basic understanding of how you can set the severity on a certain bug that you encounter. Okay. Again, go over it in detail when you review this document, and if you have any questions, let me know. Now, the test metrics. So, what are the metrics that we are going to calculate? We are going to calculate the percentage complete, percentage of work in progress, percentage failed, percentage passed, number of defects, severity wise. So, these are some things that you are going to collect. These are some numbers that you are going to collect weekly or daily. And then the status report is going to be sent out every day. The entire project status is going to be sent out every week, and daily execution status needs to be sent every day. So basically we are establishing a communication protocol. Now the defect tracking and reporting process is defined here. So how does it begin? You start by reporting a defect, and then the test lead will validate the defect. Again, this is a process that I have customized for my own project. If you choose that, there should not be a test lead who will validate the process, and you will directly create a defect and send it to the development team, that is completely up to you. The process definition is up to you. But once the process is defined and it is put in the test plan, it is customary for all the team members to follow the process as it is mentioned in the test plan. Okay, and then the dev lead will assign the defects, the developer will fix it, the tester will retest, approved. Okay, so this is basically the defect tracking and reporting process. Now the defect management process. Here I am defining what is the tool that I am going to use. Okay, I'm using ALM. Again, I have included all the details about ALM so that when you refer to this document in the future, you will have a comprehensive idea. So how do you create a test in ALM? So I have included that process also. So go over it when you are reviewing this document. And how do you execute the test from ALM? Again, same thing. I've included a detailed process. Now is the section for risks and risk management. Now, what are the risks at a high level? The schedule might get delayed. So how are they going to mitigate it? They're going to have some buffer to the schedule ahead of time to make sure. So again, we discussed this when we were talking about the test documentation. I think it was in week 2 or something. Typically, if I have 100 test cases and I can execute 10 per day. So that means my test cycle should be 10 days, correct? But then when I give an estimate or when I'm going to give my schedules, I'm going to add 10 plus 25%. So that means 10 plus approximately 2.5 or 3 days. So that means I'll give my estimate as 30 days. Why am I doing this? In case there are any delays, I'll be able to absorb the risk of the schedule. I can mitigate it by making sure I add this buffer into my estimation itself. So that is what this is talking about. Some buffer should be added to the schedule for contingencies. Okay, again the resources, holidays and vacations, you should make sure that you estimate that ahead of time. And defect management. So about defects, you have a defect management process in place, coordination, so on and so forth. Okay, all the defects are usually addressed and a mitigation plan is created. Now the communication, who all are the team members involved, the point of contacts, their name and their contact information is usually shared across the team. So what is expected of each team is again clearly defined here. Again, I did this to make sure you all will have a template to follow in the future. So go ahead and review that when you do get some time and get back to me if you have any questions. Again, test environment, as we've seen in the functional specifications document yesterday, it will be hosted on some site, X company site, and it will have 2 servers, one to host the actual website and the language, and other to host the database. Again, a Windows environment with some browser specification should be available to each tester. So that is your environment section. So this completes a high-level walkthrough of your test plan document. Any questions, team, or anything you think that I have not included? Or anything that you want me to go over one more time? Again, I chose HPALM as the tool that I'm going to use for defect management. You can choose anything else. If you choose that, Bugzilla is the tool that you're going to use, include details about that tool. So if you're not going to use a tool, share the template that you're going to use for tracking the defect. Share the Excel sheet template with the required number of the required fields and the order in which those fields are required. Have all that information and embed that document to your test plan to make sure the test plan contains all that information. Okay, anything team, I will send out this document to everybody. But again, I left adding the scenarios to you. I just created the admin module scenarios just as a guideline. So if you are in the process of creating the requirements for the live project, you can just add it to the sheet and carry on, or create your own template. That is completely up to you. Any other questions? Okay. If there are no questions, we'll quickly see how to write an effective manual testing resume. So, is there anything that you want me to address in the resume section, like specifically? All right, then let's just go over the basic details, and then we can come back and address your questions that you might have. Okay. All right. Some of the high-level aspects that you should include in your resume is your title, professional summary, educational details, skills, and your project information. Again, there are different schools of thought. Some people think that the resume should include all your experience, no matter how many pages it takes. But I believe that an ideal resume should be somewhere between 2 and 4 pages. 5 is still okay, but not more than that. Again, decide on a title for your resume. Since most of you are in the beginner stage, an apt title would be um, manual tester, like with your experience. If you're certified, you can say the certification information, say ISTQB. You can include your experience first, 2 years manual tester, ISTQB. If you, okay, this could be a good title. And then header, the first part of your resume is your name basically. So something like this, my name, and here you can include your job title, like QA engineer, because you are a beginner. So if it was me, I would write a QA analyst, and I would write automation, QTP automation expert. And then I would go about displaying my certifications. Again, for the certifications, you can include, you can use, a JPEG of that certification logo. You can do that to make it more effective. And actually, some people like to give their Facebook profile details, but I'm not so sure about it. It's up to you. If you are comfortable sharing your Facebook page, go ahead and do that. Otherwise, your professional networking pages like LinkedIn, you can add that information, then your email and your cell phone. So make sure that you let know of your online presence if you have one. If you write in a blog, or if you follow a blog, if you write in a blog, basically try to include that web page here. But if you are basically like following a blog, probably that won't make any relevance here. But if you have a web page, or if you have any kind of professional social networking, make sure that you include that. Okay, so this will become your header. The important thing to notice is you have to decide on a title for yourself. For a beginner, manual tester, QA engineer is a good title to have. So try to use that. And then if you have any certifications, make sure you include those, and then put in a JPEG of that certification image, so that it creates a visual impact as soon as you see it, right? So these days, the first and foremost thing that is happening here is resumes are picked up by automatic website search engines. So these days, it happens very rarely that a person will sit and go through your resume and decide on whether it is right or wrong. Yes, that will happen first, but initially the screening or the picking up of resumes are happening based on a keyword search. Okay, so it is very important to include the right kind of keywords in your resume, right? Not just include words, you have to make sure that you repeat them often, or repeat them a couple of times, a lot of times in fact, in your resume, to make an impact. Okay, Okay, now we'll see how to include those keywords. So this is how you write the header, and then you move on to objective. Again, there are different schools of thoughts about whether you need to have the objective section or not. In my opinion, if you are already a QA, and you've had like a good amount of experience, I think the objective section is optional. But if you are somebody new or making a switch to QA, this is a good section to explain why you are making the switch or why you chose the QA field. Okay, so one such example statement could be objective is to exercise my potential and apply the software testing knowledge that I gained So here you can say either through your certification or through online course. You don't have to mention where you took the course, that is optional. But you can say you took an online course for, say, again, the live hours that we have for this course might be just 40. But the amount of time that you put in for self-preparation would be much more. So probably you can just round that up to 100 hours, right? So this is a kind of statement that you are making to make sure that the person who is reading your resume understands why you are making the switch, why you have chosen a QA field. So this will be a wonderful opportunity for you to include that information. Again, this field or this section of your resume will not very much help in the keyword picking. So this will come into picture once the initial screening is done and your resume goes into the hands of a particular person, either a consultant or the employer who is again doing the second level of screening on your resumes. So another question that I get asked again is in the first section when you are including your header, if I have a certification CSC or ISTQB, will it help me? A lot of people will say no, but I would like to say yes, because again, as we discussed in the class yesterday, it shows that you have a dedicated interest, a committed interest towards this field. So for beginners, I highly recommend thinking along the lines of a certification to make sure that, again, ISTQB, CSTE form good keywords. So these can further help in the resume being picked up during the initial screening. Okay, so that becomes your next section, which is the objective. Next, what you have to define is the professional summary. I see that a lot of beginners are always wondering, what do I include here? Because either they don't think that they have enough QA experience to write in this section. But I would say concentrate on what you have rather than on what you don't. Give yourself credit. We all, I'm sure, know more than we think we do. So you all have made it a point to go through these classes, and if not now, eventually you will sit down someday to work on your live project. I'm sure on that day when you have questions, you will just try to figure out a way to answer them. Either you will do some more self-study, do some research on Google, or you might come to me and ask me a question, or you might reach to our website. Whichever way that you're following, basically all that is because you're taking the software testing as a profession. So just because it does not mean that just because you didn't get paid to do a testing job, or just because somebody did not have a hiring contract because you did a testing job, it does not mean that you do not have professional experience. Okay. Again, this depends on how much professional commitment that you're giving to the testing field, or how much of professionalism you're putting into this. Into learning this trade. Okay, so in the professional summary, what you can include is, if you have any manual testing experience, say for example, if you have 1 year of manual testing experience, you can include 1 year of, again if you just say testing experience, the chances that the resume will get picked will be slim. So before we even write the professional summary, let's take a minute and discuss what could be the keywords that will help your resume get picked up, right? So when you think of manual testing, what are some of the things that we need to think about? The type of the project, right? The flow, or the development methodology that a certain project follows. So either it could be linear, which is waterfall, right? SDLC, 6 phases, we talked about it in the first session. It could be that, or it could be agile. So if it is agile, it could mean it is the Scrum methodology, right? So in the agile world, what are the words that get used most often? Scrum, sprint, backlog. Sprint is nothing but a cycle. Backlog is nothing but your functional specifications document. And user stories is nothing but your requirements. And what else do we have? Yeah, some of these words, right? These are some of the words that that are associated with the agile world, correct? And agile is gaining popularity these days. So most of the projects are actually converting to the agile methodology. So it will help if you have a good understanding of the agile process. Again, in the linear world, what is there? You have things like test planning, right? And reviewing, peer reviewing, test case creation, which is test design, and test data mining. Again, this could be a manual process, or it could happen using SQL from the database. And defect reporting. It could be test metric gathering. Defect management, status reporting. Have I missed anything else, team? I think this is basically it. So apart from these activities, there is not much into manual testing, correct? Again, another thing, so if we look at the flow, right? So these will become your keywords. If you are having if you put an agile project into your resume, these will become your keywords. If you put in a manual testing project, these will become your keywords. Okay, so a resume that contains these words and contains it repetitively. Not just containing is enough. Not having these words in your resume, that's not enough. Having them repetitively over and over is very, very important. Okay, I will now show you how you can use these words repetitively, because a lot of you, I'm sure, feel that you haven't done enough projects to be able to repeat something over and over again. So we'll see how we can solve that problem. Okay, in the professional summary, you can say 1 year of QA experience, you can say, working in agile, Scrum, and linear projects. Okay, so here basically you're actually not just giving information, but you're also saying that you are aware of the different methodologies in which project development happens. Okay, so that is one. Or you can say again certification information if you have any, include certification. Next comes tools. So for defect management, so effectively, again, you don't have to use the same words. I'm just trying to come up with something on fly. Effectively executed defect management using, you can include tools like Jira, Bugzilla, HPALM. Again, any tools that you're familiar with, make sure you include that. Here, what are you doing? You're actually including the defect management keyword, at the same time using these tool names, which are again keywords. Okay. Next, you can say another thing if you have, again, familiar with QTP. You can say keyword and keyword and data driven methodologies in VB scripting. So if you see, we are trying to include as many keywords as we can. Here, one more thing that you need to be very, conscious about writing a resume is, do not write anything that you are not confident about. See, you might not have really attended a QTP seminar, or you might not have attended a, training session, or you might not be an expert in QTP. But do not write that you're familiar with QTP if you're not. Okay? If you are including a word called keyword driven or data driven testing into your resume, make sure that you know what it means. Make sure that you have spent some time understanding what it means. See, nobody expects you to be an expert, but that doesn't mean nobody expects you to put, and then you don't have to put stuff that's not true. So try to strike that balance. So before you even write a resume, spend some time assessing your skills. Spend some time knowing that where you need to work a little more. Again, it is practically not possible to know everything, correct? You will not be able to, be an expert on Unix, mainframes, and then something else, or mobile technologies, security testing. That's not possible. But concentrate on what is doable in the next foreseeable future, and what interests you, and what is that will fetch you more. So work towards it. Spend a month or two on, working and building your skills. And then imagine a resume beforehand, how you would want your resume to look, and work towards it. But then do not include stuff in your resume which is not true. Okay? You should be able to answer any questions that come up based on what you've included in your resume. So basically, again, most of the time professional summary, people write it as a big chunk of paragraph, and I don't recommend that. Make sure you break it up into your points, and you write those points very clearly, trying to use the keywords as much as possible. Okay, so that is next thing. The third thing is skills. Skills, again, as I said, tools you can mention here, the environments. So what I mean by environments is, most of the applications that we test will be on Windows, right? You might actually take some time and test an application on a mobile, right, or a MacBook. So include the environments. So we will come back to, again, a question that lot of freshers have is, we don't have a real world experience, so how can I include the environment? I'll answer that question in a minute, but I'm just going to tell you what comes up in this section. Tools, again, defect management tools, project management tools, testing tools like QTP, any tool you are using. If you are using, if you are learning SQL and you've used Toad to access those SQL queries, include the name of the tool here, okay? And then programming languages you can include here, so like VB scripting and things like that. Okay, so basically anything, any technical information you can include in the skills section. And the next thing is the projects, right? Now, how many of you feel that you don't have enough project information to put in your resume? How many of you feel that your resume is very less, it might not even come for a page? I'm sure a lot of you do, right? The way to do this is, a project does not mean if it's a project unless somebody hires you to do it, unless somebody pays you to do it, right? Right now, for those of you who are complete beginners to this field, the first project that you're going to put is the live project that you're working on, correct? Again, you have not completely worked on it, so take some time to work on it, go through the different phases, stay committed to it, try to simulate the real world as much as you can, and then finish that project, and once you're done with it, include that project information. So what should the project information include here? Obviously the name of the application. You can include the name of the client. Again, this sometimes is a controversial thing, because when you put the name of the client and the description of a project, sometimes you might be giving out confidential information. So if it is anything confidential, you can always skip the client information. Just put in the application application description. Again, use an abstract. Try not to give away too much of the confidential stuff out. Okay. So next comes description. Now you can basically what they are interested in knowing is roles and responsibilities. That means what did you do during this project? As I said, for a particular testing project, it could either be an agile method or it could be either a waterfall, right? I mean, commonly used method. There could be another methodology, but commonly it could be these two. So first start with explaining what is the method that this project followed. So if say this is an agile, okay, participated in daily scrum meetings, or you were responsible for daily scrum meetings, responsible for defect management using HPALM. You could say, again, use bulleted points. You were part of test management, test planning, or in this case it will be sprint planning, right? Because test planning is again for a linear model. So try to include as many keywords as you can, and try to include as many testing activities, STLC activities as you can into a project. Now, so this first project will become your live project that we are working on, right? So if at all that is the only thing you think you worked on, you're wrong. There's something called as off-project experience. Here is this. So there's something called as off-project experience. So when we were trying to understand different testing concepts, we sometimes used AT&T site, or we used Amazon.com sometimes, or we used Facebook.com, right? So instead of just saying that somebody paid you to do it, there was a client and you were expected to give some an output to them, make yourself the client, pick up any of these projects. I would say pick up something from varied domains. Pick up one banking project, pick up one e-commerce project in the sense application. Again, we've discussed this in the first session itself. The only difference between using and testing an application is that when you're using an application, you go with the mindset that it's going to work definitely. But when you're testing it, you're actually skeptical, thinking that this feature might not work. So assume that every application, every site that you pick up to perform testing on, assume that it has flaws and you're going to find it. Even if you don't find the flaws, that means you would have executed the testing phases right, but the product was just perfect, correct? Because the intent of testing is definitely to find bugs, but finding bugs is something that comes at the last stage. Again, how many bugs are you going to find in a certain project? It is never standard. So assume that when you're testing Facebook, the product is going to be bug free, but you will still have to make sure that it's bug free by designing some tests to test it and actually executing them. So as an off project, I would actually recommend picking up a banking and e-commerce like Amazon. You can go to Chase, or you can choose ICICI Bank, any kind of a bank site you can choose and follow the testing methodology. Again, my recommendation is to choose one of these and choose them to execute them in the agile model, and choose one to do it in the waterfall model. So for one, you have to create an FSD and BRD and things like that. And for an agile product, you will have to create a backlog and things like that, and include that information in the project section. Okay. So when you get called for an interview, you will have a couple of projects in your hand. First thing is your resume will get picked up because you have some projects, and then you can explain to the instructor why you have included these commonly available sites, and how you have interpreted them as an individual project, and how you have practiced, how much of effort you put into it, and things like that. Okay, so that is a good way of preparing your resume. Any questions, team? So that's all I've got when it comes to resume. We talked about how the title should have your basic information. Choose on a title. include links for your online presence, give out your correct email address and phone numbers and things like that, contact information. In the professional summary, try to keep it in a bulleted points. In the middle, actually, you can have an objective. So this is especially important for candidates who are trying to get into software testing new, because this will give them an opportunity to explain perfectly what their intentions are and how much of an interest they have in the field. This will be an excellent introduction to the interviewer about yourself. Professional summary, you can include all the key points, like if you've attended a webinar, make sure you include that. If you've attended a class, make sure you include that. If you are certified, make sure you include that. Include things like the different kinds of projects you've worked on, the different responsibilities that you've taken, the different tools that you've used. So make sure you put all that there, and then give out your educational details. The educational details usually should be in the order of your highest education first, then to the school level. Okay. Then skills, again, are the tools that you've used, the environments that you've worked on, the languages that you know, and things like that. And project information, again, here projects are two types. One are the real projects that you work, and the other one are the off-project experience that you yourself pick up the project proactively and try to work on it, simulating the actual project environment. Okay. So include both of that. My recommendation is to have at least 3. One, the live project that we've provided, and the other 2, pick one from the Agile, pick one from the waterfall model. Use an e-commerce or banking application. Try to do the project from the beginning to the end. Create an FSD by yourself. Create a test plan by yourself. Again, you might not come up with perfect documents. Have your peers review it, have your friends review it, or you could always reach out to one of us from the software testing help team, and we'll be happy to help you. So make sure that you work on some projects. Make sure that you, again, an important thing is familiarize with at least one automation tool. That will be definitely an added advantage to your resume. Another thing you can do is brush up a little bit on the SQL skills. That will be a wonderful addition. So take some time to actually get imbibed into this profession. Give it some time. So there is no magic formula for quick success. You have to remember that resume is only an entry ticket for you to bring you closer to your employer. Again, it depends on how you handle your interview, how you handle yourself, how much are you able to back up the information, how much are you able to back up the information that you provide on the site. Okay. Rasika, did I answer your question? Your question was, if they ask what exactly do you do, then we have to come up with new feature that they are launching. How do we explain to them? I didn't get the question, but if you've gotten your answer, I'm fine with that. If there's anything else you want to know, just let me know. I'll be happy to answer. And can you send me your resume one more time? I know you did send me once. We'll just go over it and let you know if there are any changes that you need to make. Again, another advice that I'll give you all is make sure that think about getting certified. Think along those lines. There is a lot of negativity around certifications, but trust me, when it comes to resume filtering, people do pick out the resumes that actually are pro certification. So think along those lines. Give yourself time. Take your time. Study well. There are these videos available, for you to watch repetitively. Try to use that. Again, reach out, ask for help, and try to simulate the real world as much as you can. Basically, any class or any book, in fact, or anybody can only show you the direction. It's up to you about how much you make out of a class or how much you make out of a certain book or a certain article that gets published. So it's like, there is a level of guidance that you will get, but the rest you will have to go your own way. Definitely having a good resume with good keywords is a definite plus. So I see that not many of you are working on the live project. I'm not sure why that is so. There is actually another week next week, but tomorrow is officially the end of our classes, which means if you have any inputs for me, or if you have created any documents for me, I'll have something to work on for the next week. If not, tomorrow is the last class. Tomorrow we'll talk about the interview skills. Tomorrow we'll talk about all the common interview questions that get asked and how you can use those questions to your advantage. Anything else, team? Any other questions? All right, I'll take that as a no. And that's all I got for today. So we'll sign off for today and we'll meet tomorrow with interview questions. Again, I'm a gentle reminder, I have put up Excel sheet in the, I've created a Google Doc. If you have any technical questions that you want answered, please put it up there. All the non-technical questions like, how do you answer a question like, tell me about yourself, or what are the negative things about you that you think, and all those non-technical aspects, we will discuss that in tomorrow's class. Okay. I'll send out the test plan. So probably I'm hoping that that will be a good point that will actually inspire you to start the next step, which is scenario creation. So I'm hoping to see some output from you all. All right, team. That's all from me today. Thanks so much for joining in. I'll see you all tomorrow. Bye.